So good morning. Many thanks for being here. My name is Safa Swidi. I work for EUMOFA. EUMOFA is the European Observatory for Fisheries and Aquaculture Products. It's an initiative funded by the European Commission, and the initial objective was to improve market transparency for fisheries and aquaculture products. So we, at EUMOFA, we provide data that are related to all the stages of the supply chain of fisheries and aquaculture products. We also, in EUMOFA, we also carry out studies that are related to the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, but also products. And if you visit EUMOFA website, eumofa.eu, you will find a lot of data related to fisheries and aquaculture. And you also find our publications, studies, etc. We also have a stand here. We are in hall number 4, stand J700. So just come and visit us, and we will explain you more about how EUMOFA works and explain you more about our activities. So now let's start our workshop. As you know, we will talk about aquaculture. So as people working in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, we know that aquaculture is playing a growing role in providing food for the world's expanding population. We also know that consumers in general, and EU consumers in particular, have increasing expectations in terms of the quality of products, but also in terms of the sustainability of the production activities. So to talk about these aspects, I have the chance and the privilege to have 4 speakers with us today. They will provide different perspectives. They will provide the policy-making perspective, but also the industry perspective. And I told you that EUMOFA is funded by the European Commission, so we have the privilege to have the European Commission with us today with Laurène Joly. She's a policy officer at DG MARE. DG MARE is the Directorate-General for Maritime Affairs. And Laurène, please, the floor is yours. I have 3 questions for you. The first one is, can you provide us with a general overview in order to understand the place and the importance of the aquaculture products in the EU supply of fisheries and aquaculture products? Please.
Yes, so good morning, everybody. I think this is important to have a brief figure in mind about the EU aquaculture, but also global production. According to our latest figures, to give you an idea, we consume in the EU on average 23 kilograms of seafood products annually per EU citizen. And over this 23 kilograms, 6.49 kilograms are farm products, which means that aquaculture represents in the EU 28% more or less of the fish that we consume, while the rest originates from fisheries. This is important to note that this share is increasing since 2019. And it reflects exactly the supply of the EU market, in fact, because in the EU, the supply of fish mainly originates from fisheries for 75%, while in 2020, EU aquaculture production was around 1.09 million tons, and it represents 10% of the EU consumption. So EU production of aquaculture represents 10% of EU consumption of fish. So this is like the EU is traditionally a fishery market, I would say, but still 28% of the fish we consume originates from aquaculture. This is a situation which is different globally, as aquaculture production has been higher than catches since 2013. And this trend has been significantly driven by Asian countries, as their aquaculture production represents close to 92% of the world's total farm production. This increase globally of aquaculture is foreseen to continue, as OECD in their latest forecast, they expected that aquaculture will provide 57% of the fish destined to human consumption globally. So, yeah, aquaculture is increasing globally, while at EU level, it's pretty stable.
Okay, brilliant. Many thanks, Laurène, for these insights and for this general overview. And my second question to you is from consumers' perspective. Can you explain what are the consumers' preferences regarding aquaculture products?
Yes, so we always look in parallel at preferences and real behavior, because what they express as preferences and what they really buy in practice. We do some survey at EU level. The latest one is clear. There is no clear preferences for fishery products. And what the respondents have said is that for only 1/3 of them, they say they prefer the wild products, which means that the vast majority of them, they have no preference, or they say, or they don't know, or, and I think this is an interesting category because it's increasing, they said they make a distinction depending on the products. So for some products they prefer wild, for some products they prefer farm. What is also interesting from this survey is the type of information that they want to see on their products. Because the method of production, whether the product is from fishery or aquaculture, this information is in the top 3 of the information that they want to see for more than 50% of the EU consumers, just after the name of the species and the use-by date for fresh product. And if we look now at really consumption patterns, it also reflects this, because we see that in the most consumed species in the EU, there are indeed aquaculture species. And if you take salmon, shrimp, mussels, trout all together, they represent 23% of EU apparent consumption. And they are mainly aquaculture products. And also these products, when we look at monthly consumption, they are consumed in higher proportion at Easter or Christmas. So it makes also it means also that they are consumed at special occasions, and the consumers consider it also as high-value products. And there is definitely a demand for certified products, for organic aquaculture. Also, we have seen an increase of quality schemes like PGI, geographical indications, on the EU market. So, well, in conclusion, there is a high demand for aquaculture products, high-quality aquaculture products, and the perception of the product itself is good. It's not the limit. The limit is more on the perception of the activities, and that's why there's some bottlenecks still for the establishment of facilities in the EU.
Okay. Many thanks for providing insights from this perspective. And my last question to you is about the role of the European Commission. How the European Commission supports the EU aquaculture, and what are the main policies that are currently implemented?
Yeah, so, well, I will not do an overview of all the policy which apply to EU aquaculture, because of course, there is like health policy, animal welfare, environmental policy, but because we are focusing on consumers and social acceptability, I may also have highlight more what we do in that perspective. Because, so in 2021, the Commission has published the new strategic guidelines for more sustainable and competitive EU aquaculture. So these guidelines already existed. It's a new version to support more resilient and competitive aquaculture. And they define 4 main objectives for the aquaculture sector in the EU. And among these objectives, one of them is ensuring social acceptance and consumer information. This is one of the new aspects of this guideline. So it really shows that this is an important point to ensure development and competitiveness of the EU sector. And very concretely, so this strategy gives priorities, but also concrete actions and recommendations will be developed by the Commission. And under social acceptance, we are currently working on a communication campaign with the aim to inform EU citizens about the benefits of aquaculture, which is sometimes unknown. And for this campaign, we will develop some tools with a toolbox at the disposal of national authorities, regional authorities, to promote EU aquaculture. We have prepared a brochure that you see here, explaining the benefits of EU aquaculture and also the conditions for developing these activities in the EU. And of course, there is also the Test the Ocean. This is a Commission campaign with chefs and influencers for both fishery and aquaculture products. And a last thing, because I think it's important also to recall the legal framework on EU market and in particular consumer information. We have the Common Market Organization Regulation, which define notably the information to consumers that applies to fishery and aquaculture products. And there are mandatory information, in particular, about the origin and the method of production that have to be put on the product to ensure that consumer is aware of the product that he buy and make an informed decision.
Okay, brilliant. Many thanks, Laurène, for this presentation. And yes, Laurène mentioned that social acceptance is an issue that should be addressed in order to unlock the potential of the EU aquaculture. And my second speaker will tell us more about this social perception. So I have the pleasure to welcome Javier Ojeda. He's General Secretary of FEAP. For those who don't know FEAP, FEAP is the Federation of European Aquaculture Producers, and it represents the aquaculture industry in Europe. So, Javier, good morning and many thanks for being here. My question to you is the following. We know that EU aquaculture activities are well regulated. There is, I think, a bunch of regulation that regulates not only the establishment and the authorization of the aquaculture activity, but also the production activity itself. So, as producers, how do you address this issue, and what are the main, how do you address this issue, and what are the strategies that you implement in order to improve this perception and to inform consumers about the efforts being done?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I believe I can stay here. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So today, I think we all understand and share that acceptability or acceptance of aquaculture is one of the key, or I would say the key bottleneck that is hindering the development of aquaculture inside the EU. We have, okay, it's a key issue in aquaculture more than in any other activity, because our work is carried out in public domain spaces, in public domain waters in general. And it's true that we are requesting the use of water that belongs to everybody in a country for our exclusive use for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. So it's reasonable to that governments or public administrations requests aquaculture certain issues, and on social acceptability is essential to be able to reach that license to produce. And today, as Laurène has shown in the slides, aquaculture in the EU is not growing. It has been stagnant since the turn of the century, and there is not any impression that things will change over the next years. And that is, it's not only sad from an industry perspective, I mean from a professional perspective, but it's economic activity, it provides employment, and above all, it provides food. And today, And in the future, food production will become more and more important. Today, it's not very glamorous to produce food, but perhaps in the future, it can come back. So, in aquaculture, we have gone from, I wouldn't say ignoring the importance of social acceptability. Now we want to be the best in the class. And we are doing big efforts to be the best in the class. And perhaps we are making mistakes in the way, because social acceptability is not about being the best in the class. Reality in society is more complex. And I think that anybody that looks out there in the social media, on the newspapers, and you see that society behaves in very complex ways. And there are very different approaches, different stakeholders, different ways of trying to reach your values. So it's not as easy as just coming out there and explaining what you do. You're very good at doing this, blah, blah. That is not enough. And we have learned it the hard way. So there are two types of social acceptability, linked, of course, but there are two. One, they were already mentioned, the product and on the activity. On the product, it's relatively simple. If you have enough money, you go out there, we do have a good product. You go downstairs today here and you find excellent fish, excellent mollusks. And it's not so difficult to convince. You just need money and a plan, and then you can get it. But then we have acceptability of the activity. And that is much more complex. And actually, I would say that we're a little bit stuck on that. Theoretically, there are clear administrative procedures to get a license to produce. You present a project, it goes out in public information, people can give their view, blah, 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 and you get somewhere. But even if you do that in the best way, you don't get to where you want to be. You might not get your license, or it will take many more years. Down on the ground, things are complex. I mean, stakeholders or even public administrations that are not happy with the end result can create a lot of noise. And even if you have gone through the whole procedure, you will not get your license, because it can be a mayor in a city that is a political party that is different from the regional political party that is governing, and they say, okay, you didn't accept me this in another completely different field, okay, you are not going to put the farm here in front of my town. And he will make it possible. And that's what's happening in Europe. So, different stakeholders have different ways of proceeding, and reality is it's complex. So when we sit down to plan where we can go in the future, we need more than marketing people, we need psychologists, social psychologists, people that can help us to understand how things happen. And you really have to dig in, because people don't always tell you what is the problem. There might be a different issue that is really the problem there. So it's, today here I'm just saying that this is more complex than we thought some years ago, because when everybody said social acceptability, yes, let's go for it. We have several projects we've done, but it's difficult. So it's important that at least those that have a vision on where aquaculture should go, and I think that FAO has a very clear vision, and we see it all around the rest of the world, we should align ourselves. Because as an example, and I have the commission here, when we promote aquaculture, aquaculture is extremely diverse. What I represent is finfish, finfish aquaculture. And we believe that there are many different ways of producing aquaculture in a very nice, friendly with the environment and with everything. And it can be extensive, it can be freshwater, it can be marine. But what we are seeing in the world, and the blue transformation of FAO clearly says that we're going to be desperate for food, for nutritious food, for valuable food in the coming decades. So sustainable the intensification of finfish production is important. We see it in Norway, we see it in Turkey, we see it in Chile, we see it everywhere in the world except in the EU. And in the EU, we see many voices saying, we have to go for aquaculture, but aquaculture means seaweed, means low trophic level species. But there is no mention about finfish. And that is the problem, because when people listen, they say, no, aquaculture, yes, but not finfish. And then I don't want a finfish farm. I'm friendly of this, just. But it's an issue because, we send different messages around, and when reality arrives, then we don't seem to be pushing all in the same direction. So, okay, my message here today is that things are really, really complex and are blocking the development of aquaculture in the EU.
Okay, brilliant. Many thanks for these interesting aspects and for providing insights from this perspective. And let's move to my next speaker, still from the industry. I have the privilege to have Amyne Ismail. He's the CEO of UNIMA Distribution. UNIMA is a French company based in Madagascar, and UNIMA produces shrimps since the 90s. Its production is marketed everywhere, almost everywhere in the world, including in Europe, mainly in France, Spain, and Portugal. And since its early development, the company has developed a production model with high commitments in terms of the preservation of biodiversity, but also the preservation of the local communities. So I will stop talking about the company because I prefer you hear it from Amyne. So please tell us the story of your company and what are the main challenges that you have faced.
Okay,
please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start with some background and challenges. Some people think that sustainable aquaculture does not exist, or worse, that it would be impossible. I see it as a consequence of years of unreasonable practices marked by the intensification of fishing and aquaculture to meet the great boom of demand of seafood. Today, according to the WWF, 93.4 million tons of fish are caught worldwide each year. Intensive practices tend to lead to the overexploitation of stocks, 30% worldwide, 80% in the Mediterranean Sea alone. Farming, this is WWF again speaking, farming practices tend not to respect animal welfare and sanitary conditions. Use of antibiotics and chemicals tend to contaminate water and soils, to the point of making us dizzy. From 1950 to today, more than 90% of fish stocks have been depleted. Those practices, along with other problems, poor traceability, lack of regulation, social costs, and difficult working conditions, can no longer be sustained. They belong to an outdated world which only considers nature as a profitable, infinite resource and which always favors quantity over quality. So I'm the industry guy here. So I'd like to elaborate on UNIMA, a model to respond to market demands. I see no fatality in the system I've just described. The food challenge, which is to meet ever-increasing needs, must be reconciled with the preservation of our planet. And rather than overproduction, it calls for sustainable solutions capable of limiting, our externalities. Each of us, at our own level, has the capacity to act. Producers first, by modernizing equipment and fleets, by developing gentle farming methods that combine low density, respect for environment and ecosystems, by sharing the wealth produced with communities and integrating it into resource management, and by guaranteeing total traceability and transparency throughout the production distribution chain. Consumers then, by renewing the pact that unites us to make the act of buying a responsible one that supports a sustainable and solidarity-based system. Economy. This is the challenge that UNIMA has taken on. Our group was born in Madagascar in France more than 50 years ago, with the will to develop shrimp activities of another kind. Inspired different models, we traveled the world and looked at all the experiments that were done there, east, west, south, north, and we came up with our own system. a Madagascar, model, deeply, we call it, a sustainable model that is not based on words but on deeds. So what is our model? It is a unique aquaculture model with a very low shrimp density, total protection of mangrove, protection of forestation. In Madagascar, we suffer a lot from deforestation, and there's a major issue. And we, in the bush, in the mangrove areas, on the coastal areas, we have a role to play. And then a fully vertically integrated model, starting from feed production to domestication, hatcheries, grow-out farming, processing, distribution, and marketing in the Western countries. Strong social commitments to employees and local communities. But I'll start first with also the commitment, this is an important point, strong commitment to animal welfare through low density, gentle and respectful methods, and stringent biosecurity measures. Shrimp can die, they easily die from pathogens, and if you let them die, obviously your systems are not so good. So we want to prevent those pathogens or those mortalities to occur. A commitment to product quality and taste, and we have a multiple quality labels policy. We have been granted the prestigious French Label Rouge label, which is given by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in France, and this is the only shrimp in the world. Then we are organic and ASC certified. Then when it comes to the commitments to local communities, we provide access to drinking water for local populations, access to health. We have created 13 health centers around our various aquaculture sites, and a mother-child unit. So 26,000 consultations a year, 200 births every year. Access to education, created 10 schools, which enroll 2,000 children every year. And a continuous improvement approach to various partnerships with international NGOs, like WWF and Blue Venture, and local ones. We have an historical commitment to the preservation and regeneration of ecosystems and biodiversity. For instance, we have planted close to 3 million trees, would be mostly mangrove. And we also have a role, a transfer of management from the state to preserve, protect forest in Madagascar. We have a total of 51,000 hectares, which is 5 times the size of Paris. And then we have a low carbon policy. So if I may allow, and I don't want to be too long, I'd like to express our company purpose here. And it is to cultivate and preserve nature in order to provide healthy and sustainable food for mankind, while at the same time creating prosperity and sharing it with our employees and, of course, above all, the local communities. The heritage that we pursue is a human and collective adventure, and which I hope can serve as an example to show to all and to those who doubt it that, yes, sustainable aquaculture is not only possible, but it already exists. So what are our challenges today to meet the expectations of the consumers of tomorrow? Northern consumers are wondering whether they should keep buying product from the south due to carbon footprint issues. Allow me to share with you some of our findings and thoughts on this topic. We have conducted several assessments of UNIMA's activity with the French firm Carbon 4, led by Jean-Marc Jancovici. Some of you may know this gentleman. In 2008, Carbon 4 carried an initial assessment. It was then the first carbon assessment in the world of the seafood sector, and the first one, all sectors across in the southern hemisphere. And the findings are interesting. We realize that in our sector, shrimp, 90% of our carbon footprint is concentrated in 3 areas. Energy, mainly for us, diesel oil consumption, because we produce our own energy. There's no state supply in Madagascar on the coastal areas. Supply purchasing, and refrigerant gases. Maritime import freight between Madagascar and Europe only stands for 4 to 5% of our footprint. This shows that it is not so much importing a product from a tropical country or producing it locally that has an impact, but rather the production model that is implemented. Thanks to the actions we have taken to reduce our carbon footprint, to modernizing equipment, changing practices, reducing our fishing activity, we are proud that we've been able to reduce our emission by 35% in 12 years. On the average in the industry, big industry sectors in Europe, the average is 10% over 10 years for the same period. And our ambition is to reduce further by 50% our diesel oil consumption in the next 5 years. So our message here is that rather than trying to blame the long-distance imports, media and lobbies and politicians, and maybe those kind of sessions should encourage virtuous initiatives in the south and help building bridges over the two hemispheres, so on north. Reducing the share of animal meal is a challenge, is a big one. We are conducting experiments with insect meal and are reducing, are taking it step by step. It's a long approach. Production, the supply is not yet fully organized. We don't want to compromise taste and certification. After all, shrimp eat fish, so they need to eat fish, even in farming. We are making progress. I would like to conclude by saying that our model was not, set up to meet today's consumer expectation. We didn't think this way. It has existed as such for 30 years. It's in our DNA, maybe. And in fact, we've been anticipating consumers' expectation for decades without even realizing it. I thank you for your attention, and I welcome questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, as you said, we are literally in a global market, and you may know that the EU supply is based on mostly based on imports, and we estimate that 70% of the EU supply with fisheries and aquaculture products comes from imports. And in order to have this global perspective, we have the chance to have Audun with us today. He's Deputy Director of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division. Yes, Audun, can you please tell us from a global perspective, what are the remaining issues of the aquaculture sector, and can you tell us some successful stories from other regions?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me and for focusing on such an interesting topic, interesting and important topic. Of course, for us in FAO, the main focus is food security. It's food security for the world population. We know that even today, in 2023, close to 900 million people go to bed every day without a proper meal. They go to bed hungry. So the challenge, first of all, for FAO is to ensure that people in the world, everyone in the world, has access to safe, accessible food. And that is important today, but even more important in the future, because we know that the world population is growing. We know that the potential of increasing catches from the sea are limited. Even if we manage to bring all the wild stocks up to MSY, where they should be, and where they should be also according to the SDG 14 targets, we are talking about an additional 10 to 15 million tons. That will not solve the problem of future demand. So there are other areas as well. We can reduce waste. We can make sure that we take care of everything that is caught in the distribution chain, that there's less spoilage. Fresh fish, of course, is very depreciable. So everywhere in the world, also in the developed world, we can take better care of the fish that we catch. But even doing that, it will not be enough. So, of course, aquaculture is the solution to bridge that gap between future demand and future supply. So far, aquaculture has been growing quite rapidly. It's true that the growth rate is going down, but that's more a mathematical result, because of course the further you go into the future, the percentage increase will go down, but the volumes that are coming to market are still very, very substantial. One challenge is that this growth in aquaculture is not even. It's not spread all over the world. Asia, for example, is very dynamic, and it's dynamic for lots of reasons, for historic reasons, for the reason that fish and food is fish and shellfish or seafood in general is very much part of the culture. Not all countries, but in many countries. So there is a strong local and regional demand in Asia. South America, to some extent, has some very good examples. You asked for success stories. Chile is one. Brazil is another one, and there are many others. Ecuador in shrimp, etc. Africa is one challenge. We have, for example, one success story in Egypt. Egypt produces now more than 2 million tons of products from aquaculture every year. 2 million tons, that's quite substantial. Whereas Africa overall is about 3 million to something like that. So the challenge is to ensure and encourage production in those countries where there is demand, where there is local demand, where there is a regional demand. And that is complex. We've heard how difficult things can be. So it's not just making sure that investors are there. It's about also ensuring that the infrastructure is there, that the legislation, more than anything, that you have a legislatory framework that allows and is not too complex. We've heard all the difficulties we've had in most countries in Europe, but also in North America and in South America as well. So the overall structure framework must be conducive to aquaculture development and investment. And there are many good examples also in Africa, not only in Madagascar, of course, but also I mentioned Egypt. We've got Nigeria. We have a lot of local examples that are promising. So there are many good examples, and I'm sure that because of this demand coming from consumers, supply will be able to respond, but not respond equally, of course, in all countries. And many countries are not placing enough emphasis on the potential they have in their water resources and land resources in order to allow aquaculture development. If you want to comment on Europe, I totally agree. It's complex, and to some extent, well, you have Europe and you have the EU. Not all countries are members of the EU. And there are some other countries that also have restrictions, but for geographic reasons, they have some more available space. And of course, the further north you go, the less tourists and competing interests you have in the same waters. But as a Norwegian, I can guarantee you that aquaculture development in Norway is not easy either, and also is struggling with social acceptance, even of being too successful to some extent. I don't know if you've heard about the latest fiscal proposals in Norway targeting the aquaculture industry and salmon in particular. So social acceptance is certainly fundamental if we want to create a vibrant and successful aquaculture sector in the future.
Yeah. Brilliant. Many thanks. Many thanks to you, and many thanks to all the speakers. You provided complementary aspects and answers. So for now, let's open the discussion and the floor to the audience. If you have any comments or any thoughts that you would like to share, or any question to my speakers, please don't hesitate. There is a microphone in the middle of the room, so you can use it. Yeah, I see no hands raised right now, but I will take this opportunity to ask a question, because there is the need to meet consumers' demand for high-quality products while reducing the environmental impact is an issue. So to what extent innovation and innovative solutions could represent an opportunity to address this issue? maybe Javier, from from producers' perspective, to what extent innovation is implemented and can provide answers to this issue.
Okay, innovation is essential, but of course we have to look at innovation in its broad sense. I mean, today, if you ask me, we are in deep need of innovation on finding ways to reach social acceptance. I mean, innovation in the legal framework, innovation, not only technological innovation, but I think we are quite good at that. I mean, today, technological innovation or innovation on technical stuff, it's not a bottleneck. Things can always improve. We always have, over time, moving goalposts on many issues in which we have to learn basic science and we have to learn how to implement on, I don't know, environmental matters, carbon footprint, animal welfare, many of them. But we are quite successful in finding solution to that. But that is not enough. We need it, yes, but it's not the main issue. But certainly we have to be listening and open our eyes all the time to how society changes, the different views, things that are important today were completely unimportant 20 years ago. So it's important, but we have to frame it properly.
Okay. Is there? Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, Flavio Corsin from Aquaspark. Good to see a couple of friends actually on the panel. We have seen in Norway the mess that happened with the tax, 40%, 35%, and so on. We have seen what happened in North America, Canada, US, banning cages because of different dynamics and different pools. Do you expect anything similar, or do you see any trends similar towards taking the cages out or limiting or taxing the cages in the European Union? I guess it's a European Union question, it's a Javier question, but anybody else on the panel? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I don't know if maybe Laurène, you
I have one here. Extra one.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I'm not aware, so it's probably a good sign because it means that probably it's not in the pipeline. I think really in the EU we are really much more on the opposite, trying to develop our aquaculture. Of course, an aquaculture which is respectful of the environment and which meets already very, very strict criteria. But the challenge is really to boost our production. And this is the purpose of this EU strategic guidelines. This is also the purpose of the reason why we support with funding. So, I don't see this. Well, I don't see these trends, but maybe you have a different view.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, this one. Well, yes, governments have this tendency to copy tools to bring more taxes into the coffers of to the boxes in the treasury of the country. So, but of course, the situation is different in Norway, in which this it's a huge industry and the tax it's a big issue. In other countries, right now, no. In other outside of the European countries like UK, perhaps, but if what's happening today in Norway happens in EU countries, it would directly close aquaculture. So I don't see it coming. But it's bad because it affects everything. It affects innovation. It affects suppliers. It affects everything and overspills to other species, even if this is only related to what our fish species are farmed in Norway. Yeah.
And as Laurène said, I think that there is a willingness to support the EU aquaculture to be developed, and there are some funds implemented by the European Commission to support EU producers to meet the consumers' demand in terms of volumes, but also in terms of respect of the environment and to do innovation, to innovate as well.
That is true, but as I mentioned before, when we look at what the Commission says, it says, yes, aquaculture, support aquaculture, but then it's for low trophic level species. And that is not, we think that it's not the best approach, because today, even if you farm high trophic level species, you feed them low trophic raw materials, and you're basically in the same position as low trophic species, because low trophic species is a concept that works in the ecosystem science, but it doesn't work in the farming of animals. And we are trying to project land-based ecosystem into the sea ecosystem and the low trophic or high trophic level. So multi-trophic aquaculture can be good in certain places, but we still have to see, but it's not, doesn't seem to become a mainstream. Organic aquaculture could be part of the solution, but only part of the solution. Here we're looking also at the importance of quantities of food, not only of type of production. And macroalgae, it's fine, but we haven't seen any growth in algae, macroalgae farming in the EU for decades. It doesn't seem to be coming, regardless of the efforts of the Commission. And if we are able to grow the markets, what will happen is that we will end up importing the macroalgae from Asia. It's very difficult to do things in the sea in Europe. It's for different stakeholders, different activities. There's no space, and people will complain if they see buoys with macroalgae. I don't like them. You will not farm macroalgae in Europe. It will not grow as expected, unfortunately, because we have a very good plan. But we'll see. Well, let's trust the Commission in any case.
Well, just if I can add, just on the market perspective, because from the market perspective, I would say we truly believe in diversification, and we don't, I mean, there is no species more important than another. There is a complementarity also between fisheries, between aquaculture, between imports, between EU supply, because for the moment we still need our imports for consumption reasons, but also because our processing industry needs raw material. So I truly believe in diversifications. I also think we have still good examples in the EU, even if it's small volumes of finfish aquaculture, which are well functioning. And maybe this is smaller, so we don't always think about it. But in Eastern Europe, we have some example where traditionally aquaculture was there since a long time, and the acceptability of the activities is much more important because it has always been there, and maybe it's good examples that we could also, we don't often think about them, but maybe it's also good examples that we could take into account. But I fully agree that diversification of products from the market aspect, it's something like very, very important.
Many thank you. Is there any question, please?
Hi. So I was very interested in UNIMA's example of farming, which is a very holistic view of sustainability. It's covering pretty much everything, social, environmental. It's a beautiful, company you've built. The only question I have, I'm in the trade, and my question, I work on volumes, and when we talked about before feeding the world, I'm wondering, is your model working to feed the world? Prawns from Madagascar are usually premium products. We sell this in nice supermarkets, and goes to nice restaurants and stuff like that. But when it comes to addressing those 900 million people who go to sleep, go to bed without a proper meal, how can this work? This is really a question in my business I have every day. And just I don't know how to solve that. I'm like, is seafood just a premium product? It's going to be luxury. What the other one's going to eat then? So what do you think about it?
I'll give you a question. It's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
I like to take the other example, Ecuador. I think they're more than 1,200,000 tons this year, and they're talking of 2 million. Some people said they could produce 4 million tons in a few years, starting from 200,000 a few years back. They are feeding the world. But at what they're growing at an incredible pace, and the only way to survive, because there's actually oversupply, prices are getting, prices are going down for them, and the only answer they have is to produce more, to be more competitive. So they produce more and they feed the world. But then, how to produce more? I think the way they put the system is, maybe under jeopardy, more product per hectare, intensification, and it may lead to disease issues, to problems in the future, and sustainability is at stake. So in our case in Madagascar, we don't grow that much, you're right. Our production is limited. I would love to grow. We have a few issues here to, have greater quantities. First thing is that, yes, we are expensive. We're expensive because all what we're doing has a cost. And it has to be accepted by the market. And this is a big portion of our job now, is to try to precisely let the consumers know why we're different, why it is a better product. First, they taste it and they know it's good, but then can they afford the price? We had a very good growth in the recent years now with inflation and the recent crisis. I must say that the fishmongers stand in any retailers are pretty empty today, so it's difficult. And then there is this resistance and we have to improve. We have to improve because we have to be more competitive even in our model. So this is why I talked about the energy consumption pattern, which is we have to invest substantially in the energy, in conversion into solar energy, and invest to reduce our feed conversion ratio to be more competitive, so that we could develop more volumes to be present on the market. But we'll be always, be talking to the high-end markets, and obviously we're not going to, be feeding the whole world. But I think that you need both, and that's what there's always in the market. There's always a high segment and a lower segment. The question today is the lower segment feeding the world? Yes, it does. It does in the shrimp industry. You have substantially, important growth, but I question the viability of them, and I would caution that. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but I hope to grow. And if the market acceptance of our product and our pricing, was made easier, yes, we would grow and substantially could increase. And think of Africa, because Africa is a continent to be. There's a lot of room, a lot of seawater. We don't have those problems, issues, with, scarcity of land and competition with tourism. Madagascar, there's virtually nobody on the coast. In tourism industry. And you could do it. It doesn't mean that you could do anything you want. No, be respectful, do it right. But you have the land and the water if you want to do things. So Africa is probably one of the solution. It needs proper flow of investment, so it means financing. And that's one challenge, a big challenge.
Well, I can only agree with that. When I say we have to feed the world, it doesn't mean that everyone has to eat the same thing every day. One of the fascinating things with the seafood sector is really how fragmented it is, which is both positive and negative. It's negative in the sense that very often we speak with too many voices, but it's fascinating that we have so incredibly diverse and such a variety of wonderful products, and certainly there is a room for everyone. We're talking about consumers and segmentation, and of course you have high end, you have low end, you have consumers that focus on different things, or the same consumers that focus on different things depending on the occasion. So certainly, in general, though, I think we also have to use more marketing in fisheries and aquaculture than we've done before. Very often, I think we focus too much on the production side and not enough weight is being given to what the consumers really want, not only in terms of food, but the values that you transmit through your products, the way you present it, how you communicate, the respect for the environment and the people that are involved and all this. So I think there is a great potential to improve also the way the sector communicates to consumers, to the market. But I'd like just 30 seconds to revert to something you asked about before, innovation. I think innovation is fundamental. In many countries, we will not have more space and more access to water than we have today. So if we want to grow production, we certainly have to intensify. We have to innovate in feed conversion, in growth rates, in survival rates at all levels in order to improve. So certainly innovation and science research is is fundamental for the sector to grow as it should. Thank you.
Brilliant. Many thanks to you all for your presentations and for your availability to prepare this workshop. Before closing this workshop, I would like to ask you to deliver a final message. Yes, Laurène, if you would like to start.
Well, thank you very much, first, all of you, for being here for this discussion. No, I think, for me, I have the feeling that the state of play on social acceptability, we more or less all agree that the focus should be really on social activity of the activities, and that we have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we should use all of them, not focus only on one aspect, but use innovation, use campaign, use collective bodies, psychologists, as Javier said, use everything which is at our disposal to really try to understand what can make it and also not focus on one type of aquaculture, but a combination of all the different types and of aquaculture production in the EU.
Javier.
Okay, there is a fact that we should always consider and not hide. It's that human population is above 8 billion people now. It will continue to be growing, and human beings need to eat every day. Unfortunately, some people can't, but the way we produce food is very important. So we have to find ways to produce food for our population. And seafood, meaning aquatic food, because we also have fresh water, is a very, very resource-efficient way of producing food. So social acceptance should find some solution, because that is our objective. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Amyne.
One interesting findings of our carbon footprint analysis was that aquaculture is 50% more efficient than fishing in carbon emission. And so, yes, it is a way to go, and to meet the expectations of the consumers that are really becoming aware of those matters. So I think there's a lot to be done, and I'll repeat the message I've just passed. Africa may be a playground tomorrow for the world, and some of the innovation, some of the technology transfer could be made there, and some of the investment could be probably coming from Europe or elsewhere to this continent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, aquaculture is a major part of the solution to feeding the world and to produce that gap in supply and demand, and certainly also achieving growth in Africa is fundamental, and we in FAO, the World Bank and many others are aware of this, but it's very complex. And we worked also a lot with Asian countries to try to transmit not only the technology, but to try to transmit what they have done and how they became successful in their countries, to transmit that best practice also to Africa. But you're talking not only about production, you're talking about legislation, about access to finance, insurance, having the banking system in place, regional transportation. You have all these issues that are complex. And we are then not only talking about producing in Africa for exports to the West. We're talking about, regional consumption, regional trade. And as you may know, regional trade in Africa is not easy either, because of the complexity of rules and regulations. So a lot of things have to fall in place, but I'm sure we will get there slowly but surely. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you all, and thank you for your active participation. Thank you. Have a nice day.